you.
And you are live, ma'am.
I don't know when I became ma'am.
You are live, President Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Abeta, sir. Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And as ever, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the New Mexico flag in English and Spanish, as well as the acknowledgement of tribal land. Anybody feeling inspired to lead these? If not, I'm happy to. And I should note at the start of this meeting that we do have Secretary Bose and Board Member Anderson in attendance. Vice President Garcia and Dr. Gonzalez will not be attending tonight. Okay, we'll go ahead with the pledge first and then the salute to the New Mexico flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo Zia de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. And the acknowledgement of tribal land. We acknowledge the original people of the land, the Tsuki Pueblo people and other tribal nations, and ask them to walk with us today as we share and learn together. Thank you very much. Now we are on to approval of the agenda. Superintendent, are there any changes desired?
President Noble, there are no changes for tonight's agenda.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Secretary Bose. Second. Thank you, Board Member Anderson. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Secretary Bose.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
And the President also votes yes. We have approved the agenda. Moving on to Roman numeral 2, our executive session. Secretary Bose.
Madam President, I would like to make a motion that the Board of Education move into executive session where we will discuss collective bargaining, Santa Fe Federation of School Employees, and also the discussion of purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property as it relates to Tierra Contenta Phase 3 development school property land offer.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and second that. And we'll do a roll call vote on going into executive session. Secretary Bose.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
And the President also votes yes. Okay, we will go into executive session on the other link, and we will be back right around 5:30. See you all then. Thank you.
We can hear.
Get going when Secretary Bose rejoins us. There she is. Okay, Superintendent, you ready? You can just nod. You don't have to spit out your water.
I mean, I am.
All right, Secretary Bose, if you want to bring us back from executive session?
Yes, Madam President. I make a motion to bring the Board of Education out of executive session where we discuss collective bargaining, the Santa Fe Federation of School Employees, and the discussion of the purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property in Tierra Contenta Phase 3 Development School Property Land Offer. No action was taken during the executive session.
Okay, that's a motion. I'll go ahead and second. And we'll do a roll call vote. I'm going to have to start changing up the order, but we'll start with Secretary Bose,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
and the president also votes yes. We are back in regular session. Welcome one and all. Moving on to Roman numeral 3, we have introduction of interpreter. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Noble. Deputy Superintendent Vanessa Romero will be introducing our interpreter.
Para servicio de traducción en español, marque 206-451-6064. A continuación, 701-802-5152. Y el número de acceso es 4277932#. Y por favor, mantenga su teléfono en silencio durante la traducción.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Roman numeral 4, we have our school board showcase. And we start tonight with Ramirez Thomas Elementary School. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble. I'd like to introduce Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Kathy Casals, as she'll be introducing the Ramirez Thomas Elementary School. One second, doesn't look like they're in yet. Here
I
they
was
come.
just let in.
Well, there we go. There she is.
Oh, there we go. Now you're popping in. We just introduced you, so if you could.
Thank you. Board President Noble, board members, and Superintendent Chavez. It's an honor to present Loretta Booker, the principal of Ramirez Thomas Elementary.
Doesn't look like she's here either at the moment.
Alma, can you check if she's in the waiting room, please?
No, she is. I just let her in.
All right.
She's
We'll just give it a moment. You can see people popping in. It might be a little slow tonight.
here. Let's see.
There she is. Miss Booker, welcome.
Thank you. I was here, yes.
There you are. We introduced you and you are in the spotlight.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here this evening. Board President Noble, members of the board, and Superintendent Chavez. I'm really excited to be able to present to you once again on Ramirez Thomas and the initiatives that we're engaging in. So if you recall, I have a PowerPoint actually, and I know that Cody was going to put that up. Awesome. Thank you, Cody. So last year, if you recall, I presented on our epic journey. And so this is the sequel. Our epic journey continues. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So as students have come back, we're seeing a really high need for explicit social emotional support and teaching students how to once again be in school. And so here's a review of our RTE core values. And what we've worked on is being able to integrate them into a student-friendly language and expectations. Next slide, please. So in order to do that, what that looks like is we're teaching students the RTE3, which is responsibility, teamwork, and empathy. Next slide, please. Again, we defined as a team what each of these expectations look like in various parts of the building. That way, teachers have a tool, like a toolkit to be able to explicitly teach these to our students, and it's consistent school-wide. Next slide, please. We also have systems of support for our teachers to be able to engage in this as well, and in creating classrooms of care. We're engaging in restorative justice, and a shout out to our Office of Student Wellness, Mary Louise Romero and Andrea Romero, for their help in this work. Teaching our second step curriculum, of course. We have a dedicated wellness block daily in our master schedule, and we have a highly active wellness team that meets weekly to discuss how we can support students and teachers to do their best work. Next slide, please. And as something to kick off this initiative and welcome students back and get them excited about being in school again, our team created a welcome back video that highlights this initiative. And I want to again shout out Mr. Asorgan, our fourth grade teacher, and Miss Hong, our music teacher, for putting this video together, and those who engaged in being filmed. So I hope you enjoy our video.
Back to school, man, we really been through it. Really ain't nothing to it but to do it. I wanna thank you for really doing your best and putting on your camera when you were doing your test. But now it's all live in the 505. 2021 still staying alive. When you're inside, you got to wear a mask, and outside you can wear it like a chin strap. To get back to the future, let your hands clap. Just kick back like Doc and Marty Mac. Fly with me, we gotta keep it clean. Wash your hands all the time, even with the vaccine. The masking so we can relax on the scene. Taking care of yourself, physically and mentally, and your emotional health. It's a good start to looking out for everyone else. I said, it goes R to the T to the E to the B to the E to the A to the R to the T to the E to the B to the E to the A to the R. For responsibility means using your ability to do what you gotta do, like standing in line, clean up time, finishing all of your work on time. T for teamwork, making the dream work. Takes me and you, but watch what we do. E for means essentially understanding what somebody else is going through, and we are the best. We be brave, eat, encourage, amaze, all resilient.
Miss Booker, don't sell that video short. It was all over social media and carried by a couple of news channels.
Absolutely, we're super excited about that. So yay, our team is awesome.
Honestly, that was so fun. That's so good. It's just hilarious. It's fabulous.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Who wrote that song?
Actually, our fourth grade teacher, Mr. Asorgan, he is known to be an amazing musician as well. And so he and our music teacher collaborated on doing the song, but he wrote the lyrics and put the music together, and Miss Hong put the actual video composition together.
Wow.
And he was featured there, right?
Cool.
He's the
Yes,
one.
he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one rapping. Yes. And our
So
students
good.
loved it. So again, like just welcoming them back and introducing our initiative of the RTE3. So thank you guys.
I think we need that in many workplaces. It's so good.
Yes,
Thank you
for
very
sure,
much.
for sure. Thank you.
And it has been on social media. I'll go find it. I've missed it, but
I want to say Channel 7 carried it for a couple of days. Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot of fun. It's good stuff. Thank you so much for bringing that to us, Ms. Booker and Ms. Casaus. Really appreciate it. Excellent.
Thank you all for having us. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the Santa Fe High School Orchestra. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble. take this time to introduce our district music coordinator, Ms. April Pickrell.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting us to perform for you. Tonight, you will hear a performance from the Santa Fe High School Chamber Orchestra under the direction of Gabe Tafoya. Gabe has served the district since 2014, and his students consistently earn positions in the all-state ensembles and earn superior ratings at contests. Gabe's student, Marcos Cano, received a full music scholarship to the University of Denver last school year. Gabe is finishing his national board certification and attending UNM pursuing his master's in music education. It is a busy time of year for music students. At this time, students are preparing to audition for all-state, honor ensembles, and solo competitions. Please keep them in your thoughts as they have all of these auditions and competitions coming up. Please enjoy this performance from the Chamber Orchestra as they perform the Allegro section from Jupiter by Mozart, arranged by John Caponegro.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pickerel. Really appreciate that. It's great to see that they get to play together again. And of course, some of us did get to hear the Santa Fe High School Orchestra at the ribbon cutting for the new administration building at Santa Fe High and our launch of the Geo Bond work. And it's really a treat. And they get to play together again. We don't have all those mixed boxes.
Yes, thank you.
They're
And I appreciate.
phenomenal.
Go ahead.
They're phenomenal online and even better in person.
Thank you again for having us. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks for bringing that to us. Okay, moving swiftly along, Roman numeral 5 is public forum. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble. I would like to introduce our Public Information Officer, Mr. Cody Donarski.
Good evening, Board President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. There are 5 people signed up for public forum comment tonight. Rules for public forum. Please listen and speak with respect. No uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own. There will be no sharing of time. Self-monitor and observe the 3-minute time limit. I will give you a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue is allowed only during public forum and not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic. Whether it is on the agenda or not, your input will be taken into consideration. Please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take action on items that are not on the agenda. Please do not discuss employee matters which may result in disciplinary action. Instead, notify the employee supervisor, the Human Resources Department, or the superintendent. All right, the first public forum comment tonight is from Jenny St. Clair. Dear board members, I'd like to talk about PDPs. These are professional development plans. They have been required by New Mexico Public Education Department for years as part of the teacher evaluation process. This year, NMPED has rolled out a new format for our PDPs and evaluations that is structured as a class. It requires watching a 2-hour video, answering dozens of open-ended questions, uploading artifacts to prove whether statements we make about our teaching and reflecting on our skill level as teachers. It takes up hours of teachers' time, hours that do not directly benefit students. All teachers, regardless of years of experience or levels of licensure, are required to submit a PDP every year. General teacher consensus is that this is a waste of time and always has been. My colleagues and I have always been frustrated and insulted by this, but as usual, we are compliant. Since the new evaluation system is so complex and time-consuming, the NMPED has extended the deadline to January 8th, 2022. However, SFPS is telling teachers that they must submit their PDPs by October 13th. Evidently, SFPS teachers have more time to meet next week's deadline than other districts. The reality is that time is precious, what Santa Fe teachers don't have. We are stretched thin by all the extra supervisory duties, COVID protocols, and mandatory trainings that bombard us each week. We are covering for teacher vacancies and absences, subbing during our prep periods, accepting teacherless students into our classes, and providing for students in quarantine. The thought of spending literally hours on a meaningless bureaucratic task is pushing many of us over the edge, and the unnecessary deadline that SFPS is imposing suggests that the administration is unaware or unconcerned about the level of stress that teachers are experiencing this year. Every teacher I speak with shares the view that what we are doing is unsustainable. The PDP process requires us to set professional goals for ourselves and reflect on whether or not we achieve them. This year, I will list 2 professional goals for myself. 1, to not get COVID, and 2, not resign before May. Neither is guaranteed. I suggest that every teacher in the district list these goals. That way, the PDP process will, for once, be truly authentic and not just a bureaucratic time suck. Hospitals across the country are implementing crisis standards of care. It is time for our district leaders to acknowledge the crisis level of teacher trauma and take quick and definitive action to remedy it. The next comment is from Zoe Gearman. Santa Fe School Board and Superintendent. I moved to Santa Fe as a first-year teacher just over 6 years ago. At the time, spending $850 a month on rent alone with a bi-weekly paycheck of $775 required penny pinching, a lot of ramen dinners, and taking on any extra babysitting gigs I could. Having dutifully served Santa Fe Public Schools as a teacher for the last 6 years, as advancing to a tier 2 licensure status, one might assume that my circumstances have changed considerably. However, I'm looking at similar, if not worse, prospects in the coming months. The humble one-bedroom casita that I moved into when I first came to Santa Fe is where I continue to live for the time being, and I'm currently one of the lucky ones because rent hasn't increased dramatically over my time here. That being said, the property was sold 3 weeks ago, and I was told to expect a 65% rent increase in the next 3 months. This simply is not feasible on my salary from Santa Fe Public Schools, and as I frantically search for housing alternatives, I'm realizing that very little in this city is. I am now having to weigh my two options: continue working in Santa Fe while saving every penny I earn to live in an undesirable and frankly demeaning space, or leaving the city and school district that have become my home in search of a place I can afford to live. I am a committed, invested teacher. I want to be here. I want to serve Santa Fe Public School students. And yet I fear that there is no longer any space for me in this city. As a tier 2 teacher operating on a single income, I should have better options. Our newest teachers, they simply won't come to Santa Fe. If I can't afford to, how could they? The housing crisis for Santa Fe Public Schools teachers is real and tangible for us right now. It is urgent, and when teachers start leaving in flocks because we can't afford to live in this city anymore, it won't just be a housing crisis on your hands. It will be a staffing one. The next comment is from Jamie Torres. Dear Santa Fe School Board and Superintendent Larry, I am currently a teacher at Kearney Elementary, and I'm proud to admit I enjoy my job as an educator, specifically in Santa Fe with the public school system. However, I do worry about how realistic it is for me to stay living in Santa Fe on an educator's salary. Well, on a level 1 teacher salary, I literally could not afford to pay the cost of rent and had to look to the kindness of my family members to let me stay with them. As a level 2 educator, with rent costing me over $1,200 for a small unit, consumes over half my income. The housing issue in Santa Fe is a crisis hitting locals hard, especially Santa Fe Public School employees. This past week, one of my amazing educational assistants had to quit her position because she cannot afford rent, only making $21,000 a year, and is able to get hired on a higher pay, benefits, and sign-on bonus working at a local retail store. I ask that Santa Fe Public School Board and Superintendent address the issue of affordable housing as soon as possible. The Santa Fe Public Schools have over 271 openings listed as of today, with 100 of those being certified positions. As I continue to see strong quality employees leave the public schools for other cities with a living wage that can keep up with the cost of living, or to other jobs that pay more, it really concerns me to think about what the welfare of the schools will be if vacancy numbers continue to rise. The Santa Fe Public Schools currently has multiple underutilized properties across the city that could be converted and utilized as teacherages, housing communities for educators and school staff new to the district and or at level 1 teaching license. Providing free or below market housing to new staff can serve as a strong recruitment tool to attract professionals into the positions we need. I propose that district officials consider investing into the establishment of teacherages and or staffing housing stipends to help attract and retain staff. As a district, we need to consider how we strengthen our veteran teacher network as well. The cost of living, buying a home, and renting a home are increasing rapidly. I also propose that the district carefully evaluate the cost of living and housing in Santa Fe and adapt our pay scales accordingly. A sustainable staff network is not realistic as staff do not have a place to live. The district constantly reminds us that we have to be compassionate of students and what may be happening in their home lives. How many are living with food and housing insecurity? We now need the district to practice the same empathy and think about this. How many staff members are showing up to work with empty stomachs and worrying about where they move to next and how they will manage to pay the rising rent costs. NEA Santa Fe has established a committee dedicated to the affordable housing crisis and its impact on educators, and asked that the school board and superintendent work with us collaboratively to support our staff accordingly. Santa Fe Public Schools can't afford to lose any more staff and need to be much more competitive in attracting new staff members to fill our nearly 300 vacancies urgently. The next public forum comment is from Flor Barraza. Hello, I am writing this email because I would like the school board to hear and consider what it's like to work at Santa Fe Public Schools with the current wages. I currently work as a secretary at an elementary school. I have been employed for 2 years now and I am making about $19,000 a year. This salary is not acceptable for the amount of work that is required of me. I am very disappointed in the raises I have received and disheartened when I hear how much people make at other jobs. Makes me question whether I should stay at my current position. My 1.5% raise is giving me a whole $12 more per paycheck. Gross, not even net. We need to pay better and we need it now. I know I'm not the only employee making such little money. I can't even afford to pay my own mortgage with what I make in a month. The cost of living in Santa Fe is very high and we need to be able to afford living here. Just the other day, I was offered a job at Dillard's making $17 an hour plus 2% commission. How is it possible that as a secretary, I don't even make that much? Makes me really doubt my decision to work at a school is even worth it. Like me, there are so many other ancillary employees that are struggling financially on what we make. We work hard, our positions are demanding, and it's time for a change. Thank you. The last public forum comment tonight is from Jill Bratton. Santa Fe Public School Board, we have a serious issue that needs to be addressed. The housing costs in Santa Fe are skyrocketing with no end in sight. I currently use 50% of my monthly salary on a 1-bedroom apartment, very basic, located on the south side. Teachers need some sort of assistance with this in order to keep teaching in Santa Fe. Teacher salaries in New Mexico are the 3rd lowest in the nation, according to, and then there is a link. We must lobby for our district and the state to pay us a living wage. We have also consistently been number 2 in the nation for teacher turnover rate, with Arizona being number 1. It is not surprising we are unable to fill vacancies and or keep teachers in the classroom with such a low pay. I have attached the 2020 New Mexico vacancy report for your reference. It shows that the region of the state, which includes Santa Fe, has the highest vacancies. Perhaps that would not be the case if teachers could afford to live in Santa Fe. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And that is the last public forum comment for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Donarski. Those were some very clear, compelling emails. And I'm guessing they relate to the next item on the agenda, our union update. I saw that we had our NEA President, Grace Mayer, with us earlier. There she is. Welcome, Grace.
I provided a PowerPoint for this portion. I'm hoping that can be pulled up. Thank you. So our local union put out a survey. So these are Santa Fe issues that we put out in August. We surveyed over 400 educators in Santa Fe Public Schools. The survey focused on 3 areas of concern to educators and community members. 1, affordable housing and student homelessness. 2, access to affordable childcare. And 3, teaching, not testing. Results tell us that all of these areas require action by our union, our district, and leaders in our Santa Fe community. Next slide. Affordable housing and student homelessness. The Santa Fe community is facing a growing crisis of housing affordability and homelessness. As an influx of new residents seek housing in and around the city, this demand has created pressure on home values and rent. Unfortunately, growth in the economy has not been shared equally. And while the very rich have grown even richer, many middle class and low-income families have struggled to keep up with rising costs. For educators, this has meant that buying a home or affording an apartment in Santa Fe has become more difficult. For many of our students, this crisis has meant more unstable housing options and an increased risk of student homelessness. Nationally, 30% of homeless people are in families with school-aged children. Few experiences are as damaging to student learning as homelessness. So we asked questions to, and our respondents answered to, the first question was, do you live in the city of Santa Fe? 79% said yes, 20% said no. Next slide. If you wanted to buy a home, including a condo or a townhome today in the city of Santa Fe that met your family's needs, could you afford it on the salary as an educator? You can see the graph, the considerable answer here is 86% no, 11% not sure. The next graph, pie chart, if you rent, have you experienced rent increases that created a financial hardship in the last 5 years? 64% said yes, 36% no. If you have rented in Santa Fe in the last 10 years, have you had to move as a result of rising rent, foreclosure on the property, or sale of or conversion of the property by the landlord? 56% said no, 43% said yes. The next question was, are you concerned about your ability to continue to work in Santa Fe due to the rising housing costs? 52% said yes, 27% said no, and 20% said not sure. The next one is very disheartening. Are you experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity now? 7.6% said yes, and 92.4% said no, which is a good indicator, but I'm concerned about the ones who did say yes. Have you ever worked with students in Santa Fe schools who was with a student in Santa Fe Public Schools who was experiencing homelessness? The majority of us have, 83.5%, and 11.5% said not sure. I'd like to read a few comments about the affordable housing. We actually asked people to sort of write to us about like comments. Couple of comments are, classes are getting larger, schools are widely understaffed. This isn't here, Cody, I'm just reading from the other comments, and then we'll move on. Compensation is not following suit. It is imperative that all staff receive adequate raises in order to ensure that additional staff don't move to the surrounding districts with lower costs of living. I know nearly a dozen students, teachers, who have left Santa Fe for Rio Rancho, Albuquerque, and Pojoaque. Not only is rent too high in Santa Fe, but the ability to own a home for even a working professional, such as a teacher, is out of reach. Housing costs in Santa Fe are astronomical. I'm paying almost my entire monthly salary in rent, which has led to me working three or even 4 jobs at a time just to pay my bills, which still leaves me with almost nothing left over at the end of the month for savings or fun. Okay, I'm going to go to the next section, which is access to affordable healthcare, childcare, I'm sorry. The challenge that parents face in accessing affordable childcare is having significant impacts on the U.S. economy. Over 2 million parents report having to quit a job, refuse the new job, or significantly change their current job due to difficulty accessing childcare. New Mexico has expanded pre-K programs in recent years, but this expansion does not have a dedicated source of funding yet. Efforts are underway to tap into the state's permanent fund to provide this funding in the future. Here in Santa Fe, this issue of child care access and affordability impacts the families and students we serve, as well as our own colleagues. Access to child care is a serious barrier in our efforts to recruit and retain and highly qualified, diverse education workforce. So steps taken by educators to provide childcare, these were the top answers. 42% of family member care for children. 37% pay for center-based childcare. 21% pay for home-based childcare. And 18% go to public school pre-K. 8% of the respondents said they had to reduce their hours, their work hours, or FTE. in order to afford the cost of the care or to care for their child themselves. Of educators who pay for childcare, the average monthly cost was between $954, was roughly $954 per month, with some reporting over $2,000 per month. So if you can scroll to the next kind of, okay, I think it's good. Have you ever needed to quit a job, decline a new job, or significantly change a job in order to accommodate the need to provide childcare to your child? 45% said yes, 54% said no. Do you think Santa Fe Public Schools should offer a high-quality childcare program for the children of district employees? 84% said yes. 12% said not sure. Very few people said no. Do you support tapping the state's permanent fund to provide a dedicated source of revenue for pre-K programs in New Mexico? 72% said yes. 22% said not sure. The next set of questions was regarding teaching, not testing. And this is an issue we've been dealing with for over a decade. And some of that standardized testing has been reduced, but still not to the levels that we think it should be and for the reasons that we think it should be. Standardized testing, practice testing, and mandated adjustments to school curriculum focused on increasing student scores on tests have all impacted the freedom educators have in their classrooms. As educators, we want to see children grow in their mastery of the content we teach, but we are all also concerned that the increased focus on standardized testing takes away from the important work we do in helping our students master the social and emotional skills they will need to succeed in life. We also reject the notion, advanced by the supporters of standardized testing, that as professionals, we are not capable of meaningful assessing of our students' progress on a daily basis and adjusting our teaching to support their growth. We are also concerned about the narrowing of content focus, emphasizing primarily English and math, that standardized testing encourages. As educators, we want students to grow to be healthy, well-rounded individuals, capable of choosing rich lives and a full fully participating in our democracy. So on this section, the first question is, have you seen limits placed on your work as an educator due to an overemphasis on standardized testing or other mandated assessments in the district or within your schools? 64% said yes, 36% said no. Do students take standardized tests or do other mandated tests that do not assist you in your work to help them learn? 57% said yes, 42% said no. Have you experienced an increase in uncompensated work time as an educator over the last 5 years? 78% said yes, 21.9% said no. So the final question is very illuminating to all of us and should be very concerning. Are you considering resignation or retirement in the next 2 years as a result of increased educator workload? 50% said yes, 50% said no. So if we're to believe this graph, and I think this has even gone up if we were to take this survey again, that 200 people are considering leaving, in addition to the vacancies we currently have now. I did want to read a few things about childcare, which unfortunately I was going to interject when I read that section, but I'll just read a few now. As a single parent, I truly believe that going into teaching was the answer to my childcare woes. That hasn't been true. In-service days, prep days, conference days, days kiddos are sick. My preschoolers now and a couple years back with the older children don't have school on Friday, but I have to work. Where are they supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Childcare is a major future concern for my family. There are very few affordable on a teacher's salary options for childcare in Santa Fe. My husband and I have both considered changing jobs in order to provide for any future children. I think staff, children, grandchildren should not have to be included in the pre-K lottery and automatically be included in the school that they work at. There are some suggestions in some of these comments, and there's been a lot of other emails and things sent to me that I can provide some additional documentation, but I think that we need to figure out how we're going to collectively respond to this crisis. And there's several, and they're really impacting our community and our ability to maintain employment with the district. I know that I've been in discussion with Board President Noble and Superintendent Chavez regarding housing, teacherage, and also childcare for our employees. And I know we're taking steps in that direction. And I just think that we need to make a public statement that this is a considerable issue for us moving forward as a district, not unlike many other districts around the state. However, in Santa Fe, it's particularly a problem because of all the increases in housing and childcare that was always inadequate to begin with for the last 20 years. So I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions that you'd like, I can answer them.
Thank you, President Mayor. Really appreciate this. Some great responses, some great information. I was going to say this, I probably will still say this at board discussion later on, but as I know you may not say stay all the way through the meeting, it is my intention to bring forward at one of the next two meetings a resolution declaring a staffing crisis for the Santa Fe Public Schools. And I appreciate your partnership thus far and in shaping perhaps some answers or potential initial steps to that question you have on the screen there. How will we respond to these crises? I think that we have to, as you're doing tonight, raise the issue as loudly as we can. We've got to push our legislature to fund education at way more than the incremental increases that have been contemplated thus far, because, and you know, I've said it before as a former Wall Street reporter, it was like when Netflix went to streaming, when Apple introduced the iPod, everybody swoons in business when there's a big modality change. Education had a giant modality change, and we just kept rolling. And there's no swoon on Wall Street. There's no anything like that. But this is the bedrock of society, and we have to work on solutions. They're really, really big problems, but that doesn't mean we can't, as Secretary Bozé often says, do hard things. We have to roll up our sleeves and do hard things. So, you know, we can't be intimidated by the enormity of what we have to face. And we have to push the city for, honestly, not the incremental investments in affordable housing that have been contemplated, but bigger investments in affordable housing, including the ability to help people pay their not just down payments on purchases, but the big chunk of money that comes at the beginning of a rental. And we need more robust programs to support that. potentially rental vouchers. We also, maybe need to get creative. There are a lot of homes and accessory dwelling units that are sitting empty a certain amount of the time. And, perhaps we can even think about incentives to use the existing housing stock to house our educators. Because some of what's in that survey and in those results, 42% of people depending on family members to care for their children, tells us this is the community of Santa Fe. These are people who have family here. These are residents. I'm honestly surprised at the number that live in the city of Santa Fe, but really pleased. And we have to pull out everything we can, and some things will work a lot and some things will work a little and some things may not work at all, but we have to try everything right now because we're in a crisis. And I hope that the board will, pass this resolution. And again, President Mayor, I hope that you will help me think through some of these steps and how we will respond to these crises for the be it resolved part of the resolution. And we can call on our legislature and city and other governments, and we can look at what we can do within ourselves as a district, because this has been a long time. And the fact is, it's like, we've been sort of coasting on a downhill and we suddenly hit a gigantic slope and everything's accelerating really, really fast. So anyway, there's some comments. Anybody else want to say anything here or ask any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll say thank you very much, Grace. Really appreciate it. It's great information. I believe you've already sent this, but I'm sure that all of the board members would appreciate receiving these slides if you would send them to us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Roman numeral 7, student board member announcements and follow-ups. Now, I suspect this is a little bit of an artifact from another agenda. The superintendent and I have talked about working on getting new student board members because we don't currently have any. Superintendent, you want to comment on that at all? Or?
Absolutely. Thank you, Board President Noble and members of the board. So as you mentioned, this was something that was brought up previously, and I would like to introduce our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Michael Hagley, who will introduce 2 board members, one from Capitol and one from Santa Fe High. So, Mr. Hagley.
Oh, my mistake. It's not an artifact. That's so great.
No,
sorry.
yes.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Hagley. Great to see you and so glad that you have this for us.
Thank you, Board President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, and members of the board. I am very pleased to introduce our 2 new student board members this evening. Student board members are selected from an application that they submit, and we had several applications across the district from our high schools. Student board members need to be juniors or seniors at one of our district high schools, and they need to have an established record of leadership and community involvement in order to participate as student board members. The 2 individuals that selected submitted outstanding applications, and I am pleased to introduce them to you. The first student board member who is with us this evening is Angus McGinnis, and Angus is joining us by video this evening. Angus is a junior at Santa Fe High School, and he is an intern at the Institute of Computing and Research. He's also an intern at the Santa Fe Botanical Garden. And Angus is also an attorney general for the New Mexico Youth and Government. When asked why he would like to serve on the Board of Education, Mr. McGinnis said, "I would love to represent Santa Fe High School. I very much want to advocate for my fellow students at Santa Fe High School, as well as all of the students in the district. Our time in remote learning and now our return to in-person learning has been extremely challenging, and I would like to be a positive part of creating solutions." So welcome, Angus. Our second board member, student board member who had a previous conflict with her schedule this evening, but will be joining us in the next board meeting, is Stephanie Ibarra. And Stephanie is a senior at Capitol High School. Stephanie is a breakthrough student and a Super Saturday teacher with Breakthrough Santa Fe. She is also a lead volunteer with Hands On Heritage and a hostess at Pantry Dose. And when asked why Stephanie would like to be a student board member, she said that being that my senior year has come so rapidly, as well as experiencing school through a pandemic for the past 2 years, I feel as though it is finally time to get back into action and help represent our communities. I want to represent our student school board because I feel as though I can transmit an image of leadership and drive. So members of the board, Board President Noble, I present you our new student board members for this school year, Angus McGinnis and Stephanie Ibarra.
President Noble, you're on mute. Yep. I think this was actually an item we brought up during our retreat. So, yeah.
Okay, maybe. And yes. Did I hear correctly that they're both seniors?
Angus
is a junior.
Okay, so
And he's with us tonight. He's
yes.
actually on.
Welcome, Angus, and I'll invite you to say a couple words if you just want to say hello to the board, and we welcome you and Ms. Ibarra. We're very pleased to have both of you, and all things going well. I guess we have you for 2 years, and Ms. Ibarra is a senior, so we have her for 1 year, sounds like. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure. Hi, thank you so much for accepting my application. I can't wait to be on the school board. Get to work.
I have to ask, do you have an older sibling who was a student board member previously?
Yes, my older brother was Harvey McGinnis, and he was
Okay.
on the school board.
I thought so. Well, you know, he did great work, and so if you ever need any guidance, obviously it's in the family, and we appreciated him and had him with us for 2 years. So welcome to you, and please give Harvey my best. Okay, anything else from the board? Should we move on? So pleased. I've so missed having student board members. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Hagley. And again, welcome, Mr. McGinnis and Ms. Ibarra. Very, very pleased to have you. And it would be great if at some point in the near future, Ms. Ibarra doesn't have a schedule conflict, if she would come and say hello. But I guess they'll be joining us. And Superintendent, maybe you can tell me, but they join us at regular board meetings, not at study sessions, is generally how the student board members work. And again, when we get a junior like Mr. McGinnis, they stay with us for a couple years, all things going well. And they do get credit for their time. So this is part of their schoolwork, correct?
You are correct. And they'll be joining us at the first meeting of every month.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. It's really great to have student board members again. All right, moving on. Board announcements and follow-up. Any announcements from the board? I have one, which is to say thanks very much to Grace Mayer of NEA Santa Fe, as well as to the City of Santa Fe and Mayor Alan Weber and the team there, and the Chamber of Commerce and President Bridget Dixon, as well as, of course, the Superintendent and the team in the Santa Fe Public Schools. I hope some of you clocked that there has been an announcement that the city will be giving 4 hours of paid leave, offering 4 hours of paid leave to employees each month to volunteer in the Santa Fe Public Schools. This was an idea that Grace brought forward a long time ago, and it's taken some time to come to fruition, but we are forging ahead now with the partnership, the generous support of the City of Santa Fe and Mayor Weber, And the Chamber of Commerce is stepping up to ask its businesses to match the city employee contributions of volunteer hours with volunteer hours from the business sector in Santa Fe or resources, because there are lots of things. And Grace has outlined very well what some of those things might be, even if it's just prizes for teachers in classrooms that motivate students, if it's taking an educator out to lunch because they all work very hard. We've talked a lot about pickup and drop off duty and noon duty that are stretching teachers quite thin. And Ms. Mayer also made the point when we announced this, that as we now have bigger spaces and people eating outdoors, there's a for more staffing at lunch duty because there's just more ground to cover. And that's great because it keeps everybody safe from COVID. But to some extent, it seems as if the things that we can do are only limited by our imagination. And Grace has really led the way in thinking this through. And we've all, I think, played a part in bringing the community together. And we hope that the business community steps up and that we are able to work on it well within the district, because it's not an insignificant piece of work for the district to plug in a bunch of new volunteers and resources and use those well. So really appreciate the superintendent and the team thinking that through. And you know, it's just starting. It may be a little bumpy, but we will get somewhere. And this is really a great kind of wraparound initiative to community schools in a way that we can think about really fostering community and some of the passions of the City of Santa Fe employees, who of course have children in our schools and grandchildren in our schools and may have graduated from our schools, connections to our schools. And the more we knit community together and support education and stop doing what we've done in the past, which is just keep giving education more things to do. Like apparently, you know, feeding kids, looking after physical and mental wellness, and lots of other things. And, you know, I've come to really appreciate how educators always say yes, because it's in the best interest of children, and that's what they do. But I do think that it's our job as leaders to push for more support around our schools, because as we all know, it's been a heck of a time, and it's been a heck of a time at the end of a heck of a few decades. And if we believe in public education, it's really time to step up. So get pretty fired up about these things. Anyway, again, thanks to the Chamber and to the city and to the NEA and to the superintendent and district team. Really excited to see this partnership develop to support our schools. Okay. I'll just keep talking. Just lots of talking tonight. Oh, no, wait, we're on to superintendent's announcements and follow up. The superintendent gets to talk now. Mr. Chavez, over to you.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. I have three announcements. First one, Santa Fe Public Schools received a $42,000 PED computer science grant. Ms. Justine Chavez Crispin, Innovation Coordinator in the Technology Department, has been notified that Santa Fe Public Schools has been awarded $42,000 in a computer science professional learning K-8 grant. This grant is designed to promote innovation in critical area of computer science by expanding access to high quality computer science coursework for New Mexico students in grades K through 8. So wonderful opportunity for us to expand on computer science. Next update, another grant. El Camino Real Academy received $40,000 from Lano Foundation. It is a Presenting Me grant. Our congratulations to El Camino art teacher, Miss Carol Schrader, who wrote the Presenting Me grant for her middle school art and community classes. Presenting Me access through identity and application. A 2-year program at El Camino Academy was recently awarded $40,000 by the Lano Foundation. So we wanted to say congratulations to Miss Carol Schrader and El Camino. And my last update, as of this week, we started to offer COVID testing at 2 sites. one at the technology building, which is Mondays, and that is open for our staff who are not fully vaccinated to drive through and get tested that day. Monday through Friday, we're offering PCR testing, COVID testing at Aspen. And again, that was opened up this week. Those results would be submitted back to those individuals within 36 hours. As of last night, we were actually notified that today, starting today, we are offering rapid PCR COVID testing. Those results will be available within an hour. Again, that's both for staff and students. So we've actually made the transition from getting results within 36 hours to having results within an hour. And we're hoping the availability of our rapid response testing gives the option for our staff and students to remain in school or return to school in a much quicker manner. So again, this is for all staff and students district-wide. And as a reminder, I just wanted to mention, elementary students who are in quarantine do have the option of tutoring during the school day. If you guys want tutoring to be an option for your student, remember it's K through 6 or K through 8, 6, 8, yeah. Deputy.
Sorry, through 6th grade.
K through 6 during the school day, please reach out to your principal. And that concludes my superintendent's announcements and updates.
Some welcome good news. Any questions for the superintendent on his announcements? Okay, we'll move on to our presentations. We'll start with the 2021 GO bond and mill levy overview. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble. At this time, I'd like to introduce Deputy Superintendent Christy Wagner. Mr. Cody Donarski will be also help running the show, but this is just an overview of the GO bond and mill levy. And we had that kickoff event last week, as you mentioned, President Noble, at Santa Fe High. We have started to post messages through social media, quick videos, and we have a lot of yard signs and banners throughout the city. So Deputy Superintendent Christy Wagner will take us through this presentation.
Good evening, Board President, board members, superintendent, staff. Thank you for time on the agenda this evening to talk about the election. We're in the thick of election season, as I like to say. Santa Fe Public Schools has 2 important questions on the ballot this year. And so I want to walk the board and the community through what that looks like, what the election means to Santa Fe Public Schools, and the strategies we're using to tackle the campaign. So November 2nd is Election Day. It's a general election. As most people know, that means different things to different people throughout Santa Fe County. But registered voters in Santa Fe County who go to the polls will see 2 questions from Santa Fe Public Schools on their ballot. Early voting started a couple of days ago, October 5th. So some people have already had a chance to vote. The 2 items pertaining to Santa Fe Public Schools capital funding are the 2021 GO bond, and that's $100 million in prioritized school construction for facilities district-wide. I think we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary of approving the facility master plan that was worked on by the Community Review Committee, then Citizens Review Committee, to identify the highest needs of over 200 million identified district-wide. So we've prioritized just about half. And if this bond passes, we will chip away at the strategic work we do to improve our facilities district-wide. The second capital question on the election ballot for Santa Fe Public Schools is for our HB 33 mill levy. And you'll actually find that on the ballot under what's called a school buildings tax. And it's a continuation for annual funding for maintenance. So the way we like to separate these, the general obligation bond helps build our schools, mill levy helps maintain our schools, and you really can't do one without the other. They're interchangeable. These are critical funds for Santa Fe Public Schools. Our maintenance funds alone yield almost $9 million directly to the school district. The really important bit of information for our voters, for ourselves to remember is that taxes will not increase. These have been funding sources for Santa Fe Public Schools for some time. We really rely on these funds. It allows us to delineate how we're investing in our capital needs and how we're investing in our classrooms. Without these funds coming directly to Santa Fe Public Schools, we'd be at great risk of having to take from funds going directly to schools and classrooms to continue to take care of our facilities, right? Those needs wouldn't go away even if the funds went away. We can go to the next slide. We have a lot of election considerations every election year. So these are issues that come up on the ballot cyclically, and we always look at every election through a fresh lens. Of course, the election type matters. We are typically in standalone elections in February of most years. And our standalone elections might include a capital question, board member seats, but it is rare, not ever in my tenure, have we joined a general election. And so we'll be on a much larger and varied ballot. There are a couple of dozen different ballot types across the county, but from what we know of our sample ballot, the 2 questions for Santa Fe Public Schools capital funds will be at the end of the ballot, listed as GeoBond and school buildings tax. And there's explicit language that describes how we can spend those monies on the bricks and mortar in the district. Of course, we're thinking about potential election and pandemic fatigue. We understand it's been a long couple of years for many reasons in many different ways. So we're thinking about that. We're thinking about the economic challenges of our community, of our country. We're thinking about how that will affect people's moods. And it's why it's really important to remember that these taxes are a continuation. It doesn't change the fact that people are tired. It's a struggle. People are working very hard to keep up and have been for some time. We also are looking at how people are feeling after returning to school in person after a long stretch remote learning. And these things all influence, and it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but these things all influence people's moods. They influence our turnout at the polls. They influence how people feel like voting. But what we know in Santa Fe Public Schools is that we have a long history of voter support, even up with 3-to-1 margin, where we're seeing support for our capital elections, our capital campaigns. We know our community believes in our schools. We know our community supports our schools, and yet we have to be cognizant of the fact that there's many factors surrounding moods going into any election, whether it's a general election or a standalone. So with that in mind, we can go to the next slide. We employ any and every strategy we can. This is an example of an every door direct mailer, we call it. Every registered voter in Santa Fe County should be in receipt of this mailer either last or this week. The way it works is the Postal Service, with a stack of these, they go out with the mail person and they have a couple week window to put them in everyone's mailbox. I know mine came last weekend. And this is how we're presenting information, because we feel strongly it is our obligation to inform the public what these 2 questions are about, why they're important to the public schools. And this is a form of outreach that we use to do that. Another election consideration this go around is that there's 2 capital questions. And so we have to separate. One is for building and one is for maintaining. We have to repeat that message over and over because we can't do one without the other. And go ahead. As I mentioned, we have various modalities of campaign outreach. I think we add another trick to our toolbox every campaign. We have a campaign video. We'll be airing that in a minute. We use a variety of print materials. We don't just rely on rack cards or mailers. We use our buses, yard and marquee messaging. We've utilized the new Santa Fe Public Schools Friday newsletter that reaches all of our staff and our partners. We're trying to feature news and information about the election. Again, going back to those facts, why it's important to vote, and what Santa Fe Public Schools will gain from the election. We do a variety of radio and TV appearances. Superintendent Chavez has already aired a show, at least one with me. More to come. We have an ad on the radio as well that's running right now. Some of you may have heard it. We do school and community presentations. We're roughly halfway through those. The operations team goes out to the schools, or we join their Google Meet, and we present all of this material directly to our staff, asking them to invite key partners or key parents from their community to those presentations. I mentioned radio. We also do print ads. There's been things in the New Mexican, and we'll put things in other newspapers as well. Social media is a really amazing tool. We've been able to capitalize on that for the last couple of elections. And so then everything on the list gets a social media version pushed out to the public, and we can increase our frequency, we can increase our reader counts, and we can get things out more quickly. It also allows us to adjust our messaging as we feel the mood, right, the tenor of the election as we move through early voting and closer to election day. That way, the things that have gone out, the fixed materials, can be followed up by varied materials based on what we think we need to reiterate or re-message or newly message. We do partner with our charter schools so that they can share information with their school communities. Charter schools are the direct recipients of mill levy funds. They too, if in a public, in their facility, receive mill levy funds to maintain or do whatever they prioritize in their budgets at a per pupil allocation. So we don't even distribute those monies. They go directly from the county to the charter schools. And so they're a key partner in helping with the messaging. I talked about the Every Door direct mailer, and then we're working on a second mailer that will go to our repeat voters, because there's a difference between who will vote in a general election and who typically votes in a school election. So we have a targeted list of folks that will be sending a second mailer out to thank them for their support of Santa Fe Public Schools. We also, if needed, are prepared to open an information line, sort of a Q&A line. We used that during the ETN, and it was quite effective for answering questions that came from the community. I would also want to mention that you can go to sfps.info and link to almost every piece of material I've mentioned tonight, from FAQs to past bond projects, current election materials, as well as the video we're going to share in a minute. Next slide, please. Mr. Chavez already mentioned that we kicked off the campaign with a ribbon cutting last week. Thanks to everyone here tonight who attended. That was a great success and a good example of a celebration of past projects and ongoing need for the work. So we're standing, it's pretty great. We're standing on the plaza of Santa Fe High School with this great new administrative building that now secures the campus and welcome students and staff back. But then off in the corner behind the student performers, you can see the construction fence where the next phase of the project is scheduled to begin. If this bond passes, they'll be one of the first recipients of bond dollars because the next phase of the project will kick off immediately. As I mentioned, the direct mailer went out last week. It should be in mailboxes at the latest this week. The TV and radio appearances, social media are ongoing. The presentations were about halfway there. We wrap up right before Election Day. And the ads and print materials were just popping in and out, over the next month's time to make sure that if you pick up the paper one day or if you go online and read one day, but we didn't have an ad in the paper, that maybe you catch it another time. We also have some community partner presentations this month. I know Mr. Chavez and I are working on that. At this time, before we move to questions, if we could go to the last slide, I want to show you something that Cody Donarski helped us with this year. On some of the rat cards and the informational pieces out in the district, we have one of these neat little codes down in the corner. that you can actually click on and get directly to our website. So one of those techie tools that some voters in our community, I'm sure, will appreciate, that we haven't featured in past elections. Before we move to question and comment, I would like to air our election video, which is being widely shown across the district and the community, and it lives on our website.
I'm Larry Chavez, Superintendent of Santa Fe Public Schools. Every student's journey is unique, and our goal is to support that journey from preschool through high school graduation. Our graduation rates have increased, and we are seeing more students moving into their futures towards college and career.
I chose to attend ECO because of the architecture program in the school, and also because I visited the school before I came here, and I really liked how the instructor was, along with construction classes and body shop classes they have. It's really, I think it's really creative. I'm looking forward to attend the University of New Mexico and to become an architect. By the time I finish high school, I know I will be prepared for college and I will be prepared for life.
One of the reasons I chose ECO is because I came here for summer school and I really enjoyed it, and I saw that it was a very hands-on school. They treat you like an adult too. They want more of your opinion than your parents' opinion. Some of the most important things I've done here are welding, construction, and auto body. Give you certification for the classes, and you also get dual credits, which is high school and college credits. So when I graduate, I'll probably have an associate's degree. Like, they actually show me something that's going to help me in my life, or that a trade that I can go into.
Chose Mandela, it was because they had a reputation of being a school that was interested in helping kids learn in different ways. Just a lot about like, how do you learn and like, what do you want to learn? So like for me, I love biology, and my biology teacher like encourages me throughout the entirety of this process. My next steps for the future are to go to college. So I'm going to Middlebury College in Vermont, and I want to become a surgeon because I love being able to help people, and I just think it'll be a lot of fun.
The reason I chose to come to Santa Fe High, I think I just love this city. I don't know. My parents, both of them, came here when they were younger. They're high school sweethearts in ways. The coaching staff here at Santa Fe High for the football team has impacted my life both at the school and outside the school with different morals and lessons, and just becoming just a better person overall. My next steps for the future after high school is most likely going down to New Mexico Tech and studying astrophysics.
Some of the most significant things I've done over here are being a part of the AP program. I feel like we have a very good, actually great program. All the teachers here are amazing. My next steps, I'm planning to go to college somewhere on the West Coast. My eyes are on USC right now. Still trying to figure out what field of engineering, but that's my goal.
The reason I chose to come to Capital High School is because of the medical pathway offered at Capital. It's taught me a lot on how to be a leader, how to be good with people, and it's prepared me with tools and skills for college and for my future. I want to attend a university. I will be a first-generation student. I want to be a pediatrician. Pediatricians have always had my heart ever since I was little. I've been around doctors and nurses pretty much since I was super young, and I want to be able to go into medicine to be able to help out kids just like they helped me out through my hardest times.
Thanks to funding approved by Santa Fe voters, we have built effective, beautiful, and state-of-the-art schools that deliver on our educational goals. And we have maintained these buildings to provide a safe and clean learning environment. A community support only enhances a student's journey. Thank you, Santa Fe. The upcoming general election on November 2nd will have two issues on the ballot for Santa Fe Public Schools: a general obligation bond, which pays for construction, and a mill levy school buildings tax, which pays for maintenance. Both of these issues are renewals, and your taxes won't increase. This upcoming GO bond will help us finish projects we started at both Santa Fe High School and ECO. And it will provide the funding for a new facility at Mandela International Magnet School. Past GO bonds have provided new, renovated, and sustainable schools throughout the district. At Capital High School, Academy for Technology and the Classics in Santa Fe High, we expanded programming and student spaces with safety upgrades, disability access, and sustainable energy-wise improvements. This upcoming mill levy will keep our facilities going in the right direction. Maintaining our schools keeps our buildings strong, safe, and clean, and lasting longer. The COVID-19 pandemic presented us with many challenges. Mill levy funds provided upgrades to safety, including increased cleaning and air filter systems. Whether it's expanding high school options or responding to facility and safety needs in the face of COVID-19, the GO Bond and mill levy funds ensure our facilities are adapting for the current and future needs of our students. As they continue their journey, they are better prepared to meet the needs of our city and our world. At Santa Fe Public Schools, every student deserves their best journey.
Please vote, Santa Fe.
Please vote.
Please vote.
Please vote.
Please vote. Hey, Santa Fe, please vote.
On November 2nd, please vote Santa Fe. Look for both the GO Bond and mill levy on your ballot. Thank you for supporting the journey.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation tonight, and we can stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent, no questions. I just want to say that was such an excellent presentation, and I really think another example of how good the district leadership is at thinking with both their head and their heart, acknowledging, the fatigue that we're feeling and, the struggle that everyone is feeling in their own way. And that, the messages are clear and the outcomes are clear. And that's ultimately what it's all about, is getting our students where they need to be in life and supporting the people who are making that possible every day. So thank you to Miss Yonda Wagner. I know you put in a tremendous amount of time and effort on all of this, as well as your team. So thank you for the presentation. I've seen all of these various pieces of messaging all over the city and the county. So great job, and go vote.
I want to echo that. Thank you for the presentation and the clarity of the messaging around what these bonds will pay for. I think Ms. Yonda Wagner covered everything really in there, but this is, and I have told the story of a pretty surreal moment when during a statewide school boards association conference, Senator Ivy Soto, who had sponsored the Local Election Consolidation Act, faced down a room full of probably 100 angry school board members because there was throughout the state a strong feeling of concern that with these consolidated elections and with the general election, that schools might face really uphill battles in getting this funding that is really critical to upgrade and maintain our buildings in this case. And, Senator Ivy Soto said in the end, we have to be thinking about the voters. And so that's the view. It will be easier for voters to vote in consolidated elections in November. And so, all these things may be true, but the fact is this is our first one. And personally, I'm quite concerned and have shared my concerns with folks at the New Mexican, because the kickoff article in the paper that most people in town who vote read was, in my view, very slanted to say that it might be harder and here are all the reasons people might not vote for it. And there wasn't any information included in the article about what the bond would pay for, nor was there a choice made to have the simple way to explain it, which is that there's no tax increase in the article. Instead, there was some convoluted stuff about I don't know how taxes might reduce on different levels of property if the bond weren't approved. So, just to say to all of us and as board members, I think we have work to do, and we are fortunate to have good ambassadors in our community review committee who've done a lot of the hard work of prioritizing this. But we have to be able to maintain our buildings. We have to be able to upgrade continually for HVAC, for outdoor classrooms, for the things that we've needed to do to keep our students and staff safe during COVID. We have to do more sustainability, and it is very concerning if we have risk around this bond and the uncertainty of this election. So I would also say to Ms. Yonda Wagner and the superintendent, call on your board members if you want help with community partner presentations. I know that a lot of us are active on social media and we'll do our best to share the information. And it's great that there's such good information, and those students are so gorgeous and fabulously clear about why it's needed and the benefits of their schools. But we have some work to do, and I think it's just not something we can take for granted, because Santa Fe has been very good to schools on bond issues before. This election is different, and hopefully we can get the message out of the value that this will provide. And, not just, again, what we've already seen is some of the issues of people haven't been in buildings and enrollments declined. I mean, honestly, we're coming out of a pandemic where there was a lot of capital and maintenance needs, and we need these bonds more than ever. So yes, thank you for all the hard work. We've got to keep going. We've got just less than a month, and then we'll know for sure. And some of us will be very, very nervous until then. So thanks again for the presentation.
Madam President, if I could also just quickly, you mentioned the sustainability aspect, and I'm not sure that that's really highlighted enough. I mean, kind of in a broad sense, sustainability means something that's kind of self-supporting, but really at a district level, they're tackling climate change. We have an electric school bus. There are solar panels everywhere. And I don't know if people that don't visit schools on a regular basis are aware of just how incredible that aspect of our facilities and maintenance are. I mean, the sustainability program in general is just mind-boggling and so impressive and so just top-notch, and deserves every bit of support that the community can give. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bose. I would agree that's an incredibly important point. And just to add to that, if they're not already on the community partners list, environmental groups might be good community partners. The Sierra Club votes like crazy. So does the, I'm blanking on the name, but there's also
the conservation voters.
Yes, conservation voters. There's a bunch of them, and those are probably great groups, and to emphasize precisely what Secretary Bose raised, because it's true. Okay, anything else on that? Thank you again. Moving on to our next presentation, standards-based teaching and learning. Superintendent Chavez.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. As we went through the pandemic, we really saw the need to review standards-based teaching, learning, and grading. So this is a short presentation with a very large team of ours out of teaching and learning, just to give you guys kind of an idea of what type of work is actually going on currently in the district. So with that being said, it is a short presentation on standards-based teaching and learning. It is brought to us by Deputy Superintendent Vanessa Romero, Assistant Superintendents Kathy Casaus, Michael Hagley, Carl Morano, and CEO and co-founder of American Alliance for Innovative Systems, David Holden. And Mr. Cody Donarski produced the video. So I will turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Romero.
Thank you, President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. We are super excited to present tonight on standards-based teaching and learning. This truly has been a collaborative effort, just as Superintendent Chavez said, since last spring. And we thought that rather than showing many slides, we have a few at the end, we wanted to show a video that shares the voices from teachers, from students and principals who are actually doing the work right now. We also want to give a special thanks to David Holden and Amanda Wolford and his team for helping us and guiding us in this work. I also want to thank, who's not listed on this particular slide, Peter McWayne, our Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, as well as Kristen Lewis, our Professional Development Coordinator. It has been a team effort. We're super excited about the collaboration and what we're seeing in the schools. And we want to start with the video that Mr. Cody Donarski put together. It's such a beautiful video that he helped us with. And so we're super excited. Thank you.
What do skateboarding and math have in common? More than you may think. The first time you try to do a kickflip, you're probably not going to land it. It takes time, effort, and practice before you land your first kickflip. The same thing goes for math. The first time you try solving a new kind of equation in math class, you might have a hard time getting it. During the pandemic, we saw failing grades and less engagement. Teachers and staff are taking a closer look at why this happened, and many are saying that traditional grading practices may be part of the problem. In the traditional system, if a student does poorly on an assignment they just learned, they get an F in the grade book. Why is this?
Michael Phelps is one of the most decorated Olympians ever. He holds the record for the most gold medals with 23. He won 8 gold medals in one Olympics, setting the record for the most first-place finishes at a single Olympic Games. But when we talk about Michael Phelps, we don't talk about the losses that he experienced. We don't think about all the hours of practice he put into his craft, all the work leading up to his success. The same concept can be applied to grading a student.
If you can land a kickflip, you can say you landed a kickflip. No one's going to say, you landed a kickflip, but it took you 500 tries and you had, it took you 6 months or whatever. It doesn't go into that conversation. So starting with the idea that every kickflip that you miss or every time that you mess up or break a string or whatever, those are just getting you to where you want to go.
So once you plug in your air, you can turn on your bottle, which is nitrogen.
Students are expected to start new skills as beginners, but with specific feedback and practice, most are able to leave his class proficient. Mr. Codice uses a skills-based approach in his instruction and grading practices to ensure that students are able to reach proficiency by breaking down the standards by skill.
You don't sign up for the X Games 3 days after skating for the first time and receive a score on how you did. Why should we expect students to be proficient at a skill right after they learned it? Changing the approach will allow students to focus on learning a skill rather than focusing on the grade they are going to receive.
It's brought a lot more focus. We don't have the questions, how do I get my grade up? Can I do any extra credit? Because that's not part of it. It's knowing the standards. How can I learn the standard more deeply? For each standard, there's a rubric, and they know for each standard what their expectation is.
So breaking it down really helps me understand what they need to know, and it helps me teach them what they want to learn.
It deepens their understanding of different concepts, different areas of the content levels.
Learning about the success criteria was really helpful because those are things that I can actually watch them do that tells me that they're hitting that mastery.
Failing, and maybe getting a C's, and then by the time we get to the actual summative assessment at the end, they've got an A. They learned it. So all that stuff was up to learning, and I will go back and exempt that work so it doesn't count against their grade, because in the end, they showed they learned it. So it is a process, it's a building process, and those building blocks shouldn't count against it if they got lower than the grade at the end. This is practice, and if I don't do it right, that's okay, because I'm gonna practice some more, and I'm gonna practice some more, and I'm gonna do better in the end, and that practice isn't gonna hurt me.
In a traditional grading system, your grades don't tell you what you know and what you don't know in relation to the standards. This way of grading introduces accountability that allows students to focus on the skills they don't know.
Some teachers have shared with me that the kids are being more accountable for their learning. They are asking questions. They know that it's, the teachers are very clear with the standards and what success criteria is expected of them. So the kids are trying to meet all of those success criteria.
They want to master it. They want to know how they're getting to the next step. And if they're lacking these other skills, they want to know how to get to that next step. And I haven't had that before. I haven't had students be accountable for their learning. And now, breaking it down even further, now I'm able to see, and the students are able to see, like, okay, I couldn't get this because I didn't understand this. That's where they're taking that accountability.
Well, now the student is able to fix that one standard, whereas before, I gotta be whatever, I'm fine.
When you begin to learn a trick, you're gonna fail a bunch, right? You might record a video of yourself to watch to see what you're doing right and what you need to adjust. All of this is part of the process.
I'm gonna go figure out what's wrong and then run back to the board and check it. And they don't expect that to go in the grade book. They don't expect that. They expect that that's teaching them so that they will be able to understand the standard and get that intermediate or advanced level on it. So this is a perfect page on the 8.G.B.7 standard.
Ms. Park not only practices this way of grading in her classroom at Ortiz, she also shows other teachers how to leverage the same strategies in their classrooms.
It's been a shift in the learning. It's been, the whole thing is not about I got an F, it's about I learned this.
Since we started this, we decided to not only do it in isolation because we're a really small school, we combined with Chaparral and Nava, and it allows for our teachers that are in silos, like my third grade teacher, I only have one, and at the other small schools, they're in the same position. So it allows for collaboration within the schools. Our teachers are really excited about working together and getting ideas from one another and just working through the 7-step cycle. I think that teachers have always had to put the standards like on their lesson plans, and they felt like they knew their standards. But with this process that we've been doing, I think they feel like they understand them even better. I've had some of my teachers tell me that they feel like, my goodness, I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew my standards, but breaking them down, it's holding me more accountable and allowing me to teach my kids to be more accountable.
The classroom is a place to learn and practice real-world skills. Students are able to focus on their learning rather than grades and are able to perform at a higher level than before.
The standards are very big and heavy, and there's a lot of parts to them.
The students always know what we're working on, what I'm assessing them on. It's not about just showing up to work, it's about doing specific skills at a high level.
Students are able to focus on learning without the fear of failure to get there.
By the time you learn that skill, you expect to be at the top because you're gonna learn it and Mr. Colice is gonna teach you.
Seeing myself like by 1 to 3 and going up makes me feel like I'm doing something good and like I'm learning.
With a standards-based approach, teachers see grading as an integral part of the learning process and a way for students to better understand their own learning in the classroom and throughout their lives.
And that's the mindset that we have, and the idea that you're always practicing, you're always getting better. So nothing is wasted and everything is a chance to learn and grow.
Board President Noble, board members, and Superintendent Chavez. This is a roadmap of where we'll be going along this process. We are taking a very thoughtful, deliberate approach as we move forward. As Deputy Superintendent Ramirez said, we saw this happening last year. We saw during the pandemic, teachers asking about our students' grades. They know it, but we had the pandemic that kind of put up some challenges about students turning work in. So last year, when school was out, we had a 4-day symposium of leaders and principals from all over the district, where we started the work with Dave Holden and the American Alliance for Innovative Schools. This year, we are continuing our work on, again, a very thoughtful and deliberate pace, working with the standards-based planning and teaching. Our schools are working within their own PLCs, teachers are working together, and we're taking the process very slow and taking a really deep approach to it. Then next year, we will look at the standards-based grading implementation. And now I'd like to introduce Dave Holden so he can explain more.
Thank you very much, Associate Superintendent Casaus. And I'd like to say good evening to Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez. It's good to see you. And my name is David Holden. And most importantly, I am a teacher. I have been an elementary, middle, and high school teacher in the state of California starting in 1990. And I currently work with schools and districts across the country in standards-based teaching and learning and helping them develop systems so that way we can guarantee that viable and guaranteed curriculum for all students. I'm very proud to work with Santa Fe Public Schools, and I have to say, I have to brag on your central office staff, because it has just been the most highly collaborative environment that we've ever had. And I am so thrilled and honored to be a part of your journey. This is work that my team and I have done ourselves in our own schools when we were classroom teachers. And now my team is comprised of former teachers, but we still are involved in schools. We will model in classrooms, we will observe teacher teams and give feedback. And we even have one of our team members who is currently training principals in the state of Texas. So we are very involved in what's currently going on in education. Like Associate Superintendent Casaus just mentioned, earlier this year, we had some professional development in June to help develop building skills with instructional leaders within the building. Our goal is to develop a cadre of teacher leaders that can lead the implementation within their school buildings. We also created a professional development plan, a comprehensive plan to continue to provide support and training for implementing this standards-based work. So part of that plan involves in-person training, continued training at a quarterly basis for those teacher leaders, but it also involves monthly Zoom calls with central office leadership, as well as Zoom calls with those teacher leaders to support them in their implementation. I just can't say enough about how strong our collaboration is and how engaged your teacher leaders have been in every interaction that we've had. This is a multi-year journey to develop that system, but that video really illustrates the why. For us, it's about equity. The traditional grading systems, as the Deputy Superintendent Romero had mentioned earlier, they tend to penalize students who enter school who may have experienced some setbacks early on, whereas a standards-based grading system rewards students for having learned instead of penalizing them for starting off with a deficit of knowledge. So that is the best way to work towards closing the achievement gap. And I cannot be more proud of the work that we're doing. So I would just like to say thank you very much for inviting us to work with you all. And I'm very happy to be on this journey with you.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Holden. And Ms. Wilford, I believe, was the other person on your team.
Yes.
This is incredibly inspiring. And Deputy Superintendent, is there more, or are we at the question part?
We have one more slide by Michael Higley.
Okay.
Board President Noble, members of the board, this is just to show you connecting to what was mentioned before about the instructional leaders, the teacher leaders who are working directly with district curriculum and instruction staff and David Holden and his team. The teacher leaders are learning about a 7-step cycle for instructional planning based on the standards, and they are taking these concepts back to their teams at their school sites and really digging into this work on the PLCs, the professional learning communities at the schools. If you're not familiar with professional learning communities, and Cody, go ahead and go to the next slide. You'll see that graphic a little better. Professional learning communities are groups of grade level or content area teachers who plan together, focus on student learning. And this is a different configuration than a grade level or a department meeting. This is a work that is focused on student learning, and every conversation that a professional learning community team has is focused on one of 4 questions. What do we want students to know and be able to do? How will we know if they learn it? How will we respond when some students do not learn? And how will we extend the learning for students who are already proficient? And those 4 questions correspond to the planning process that the teachers are working through this year. And this is a process that truly is focused on collaboration and process rather than outcome. And so the idea isn't for students or teachers to generate a whole file full of unit plans. It's for them to become proficient at working together collaboratively, planning together, becoming more familiar with the standards, learning how to create instruction based on the standards, and assess students' learning directly based on the standards, as well as providing that important and relevant feedback to the students. This is very, very engaging work for teachers to participate in, because it's focused on their content and on the actual student learning process that's happening in the classroom. Next slide, Cody. I think we just have one more with Mr. McQueen.
Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, as students advance grades, switch classes, or transfer to different schools within our district, teachers may change, instructional materials may change, but the standards are the standards. And leveraging this deep understanding of grade level standards to accelerate learning and support equity across the district really supports all of our students.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation, and so we stand for questions.
Thank you very much to all of you. Love the metaphor. It's really very helpful. And just got to say that video was really great storytelling. Really, really love it. Good stuff. Board Member Anderson.
Thank you, Board President Noble. I just have a few questions, just 3, if you don't mind if I ask them. And I can ask them sort of all at once, and then you can answer them however you like, whomever needs to. So my first question is just, I don't know if you've identified what your biggest challenges will be in implementing the standards-based learning. I'd be interested to hear more about that. I had a question about how many classrooms are using this now, if it's beyond what we saw in the video. And one of the things that really piqued my interest was hearing about how teachers from various schools were working together. And maybe that fits into the PLCs. I don't know if that's already exists, but particularly as someone who represents a number of small schools, it was really interesting to hear that teachers are working together. So I didn't know if that would continue. And then I should have put my comment before my questions, but my comment is just, this is absolutely thrilling. I don't know if I'm more excited about it as a parent or as a board member, but this just really gets me excited about what's happening in the district. So thank you so much to all of you who worked on this.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. I think some of the challenges that we're anticipating is we want to move slow in this process. We want to allow teachers to practice this process of, unpacking standards. And what we're really trying to do is build capacity at a school level. So that's why we're getting teacher leaders to help principals move this work forward at the school sites. So that's part of the challenge, and answering the why. Why are we going to standards-based grading, or we already teach to the standards? Why are we doing this? And I think that's been one of the challenges. I think it's just really trying to make sure that the process is slow so that people understand, and working with David and curriculum and instruction, we've been very thoughtful about how to move forward with this work to build capacity at school sites.
May I add one other concern that we may have, Board Member Henderson? We're going to have to educate our community. We're going to have to educate our parents. It may not look like the traditional grading that everybody's used to, but that's why the partnership with David and his group, as they've made those transitions throughout other districts, will really help us through this process. So that partnership is very valuable. And we'll have town halls, we'll have community groups. So again, there's still a lot of educating to do, not only within the school system, but within our community.
And I was going to add to that, working with David Holden, we thought this was a perfect opportunity to have him speak to the board so that we start communicating this message publicly.
May I interject if that's okay?
Sure.
There are a couple of other challenges that we do anticipate, from our end. One of those, but this is a challenge that I'm excited for. It's about meeting individuals and schools where they are. You have 28 buildings. They're all in different places, and people within those buildings are in different places. And the challenge is to make sure that we provide customized, tailored professional learning opportunities instead of having a blanket one-size-fits-all approach. So that's a challenge from a logistical standpoint, but it's the right thing to do. And I'm really glad that SFPS is committed to meeting that challenge. Another specific challenge has to do with some of the, I won't go into excruciating detail, but in terms of some of the nuances, we've got different types of learners. We've got students from different backgrounds, different contexts, students with IEPs and other types of learning plans. So people are going to ask questions about how does this approach work with students in certain contexts. So at some point, there's going to be lots of details that people are going to have to wrestle with. But I do appreciate what Deputy Superintendent Ramirez said is about going slow to make sure that everyone is understanding and gets all the information that they need. So those are a couple of things from my end.
And then as far as the number of classes, we are seeing this at different levels across the district. And I know Michael Hegley said he wanted to add a few pieces. So it is happening in other classes. We just went to these particular schools for the footage. Mr. Hegley?
And I was just going to add that this work is really deepening the experience and expertise that all of the teachers have at various levels in different areas across the district. New Mexico is a standards-based state. We teach from standards, and all of our teachers are at various levels of proficiency in planning their instruction based on the standards. And so a lot of this work is to help them develop their skills in creating assessments that are based on the standards and providing feedback that's based on the standards. And so really the work equity again comes to mind, helping bring everybody to the same level of proficiency and expertise in all of those areas.
And I think the last question you had was how do we have schools working across or working collaboratively across the district? Professional learning communities, we have been working on that concept and getting teachers to plan over the past 3 years. But I think just being in the pandemic, we had to come up with creative ways to work collaboratively with principals, and with teachers last year virtually. So this has really provided a great opportunity to collaborate with, teachers that work in silos, for example, at a Sequia Madre or at a Nava. They have these opportunities to plan collaboratively virtually. So that's been very exciting. And most of our small schools are working together. I know Sequia Madre is working with Carlos Gilbert and Wood Gormley. And just as Ms. Baca stated in the video, it's Nava, EJ Martinez, and Chaparral.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm glad, Mr. Hagley, you brought up equity thing, because it strikes me this is a really important part of our equity conversation, because traditional grades, and Mr. Holden, I think, mentioned closing the achievement gap, and this is really, really important, so we don't just continue to reinforce kids that got a strong, structurally advantaged start, but that we can recognize the hard work of learning the standards and going deep. And, I don't know if anybody has any comments, but I'd just love to hear if there's national recognition or, any sort of bigger picture thinking and research about how this can increase equity and, reduce some of the disparities that we see in our education system.
I think from just talking like within our district, and maybe Mr. Holden can speak more on a national level, but it's very true when we're looking at progress versus a traditional grading system, when we're thoughtfully planning and we're collaborating along with special education teachers, that is, and our EL dual language teachers, I think this is an opportunity to close gaps and just standards-based, focusing on the grade level standard, where we stop perpetuating gaps and we're focused on the grade level standard. We're filling in skills, right, that kids may be missing. And I think part of it is, changing that mindset. If a child has an IEP or they're an English language learner, we have to teach a few grade levels below so that they understand. I think that's part of creating this equity. And just, as it was mentioned, I think in the video, or maybe Mr. Holden suggested, we're providing equity across the district because we're all focused on planning for high leverage standards. So if a child transfers from Salazar to a Sequia Madre or whatever the case may be, they're still being exposed to that high level of rigor while still addressing all the skills that we need to maybe fill in. And Mr. Holden or Amanda, I don't know if you had additional comments to me.
Well, I do have a few other comments. Board President Noble, I believe you had, talked about maybe like research or what's like on the national level. And this is the #1 high leverage strategy for closing the achievement gap, because in a traditional system, well, honestly, most traditional systems are not even systems at all. They're every individual teacher has their own way of looking at assessing and evaluating student learning. And that's where bias comes into play. This standards-based system requires us to collaborate, come to consensus on what is a guaranteed and viable curriculum, what are the minimum learning expectations for all students, and that is truly what's going to develop a system. It reduces, hopefully eliminates the role of bias in grading, and it rewards students for achieving the goal versus penalizing them for starting the race further behind some of their peers. In terms of research, there are several people and organizations that have done research and that we draw upon. So among them are Alfie Cohn, Kathy Vetterat, the ASCD, which is a national organization that has authors who have done research, and we get lots of our, I guess, motivation and inspiration from many of their publications. We currently work with several districts across the country, including the state of Hawaii, which is one of our clients. But we also work with small rural districts as well. And developing PLCs, and I think Peter McWayne mentioned this earlier, it's about process. It's not about a product. It's about getting people to have consistent ways of looking at instructional design. So regardless of if there's a change in instructional materials, we know how to function. So we're moving people out of their silos, and we are seeing big changes. And I could go on and on and on, so I'll stop. But we're just very passionate about this work, and we're seeing it on a national level being effective and supported by research. And I love how Santa Fe is doing it, because other districts want to go too fast and don't want to put enough support into it. So it's not only that they're doing the right thing, they're doing it the right way as well.
Oh, it's so exciting. Thank you. That was a great, I know, brief overview, but I can do some research of my own and learn more. This is really very exciting, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Deputy Superintendent Romero, you touched upon this, and I'm guessing, obviously, this is contemplated, and Mr. Holden, I think you brought it up in your comments, but if a student is changing schools at some point, we of course want to make sure that there can be connectivity across that. And how do we roll that out, especially if we're in this, we hope we get all the way there, but we're not all the way there yet. It's going to take some time. So how does that work? And if a student is in, fourth grade at one school and even changes mid-year, I suppose that would be the sort of complicated thing.
Right. President Noble, as this is a slow process, we have identified priority standards, grades kindergarten through 12, in reading and math. And I really want to thank Kristen Lewis, because she did that work. It was looking at the Common Core standards, looking at our state and assessments, and kind of creating this alignment so that we have high leverage standards in reading and math. And that was a question that teachers and principals were asking last year. We want some high leverage standards to focus on. So we've identified all those standards, and the work that we're doing with David and within PLCs and unpacking standards are those specific standards that were identified by the district. We haven't unpacked all of them. It is a process. There's about 9 standards per content area. So it is a process, and it will take time for kids to, move from school to school and be guaranteed that those high leverage standards are going to be taught. So we're working on it. I don't know if Mr. McWayne or if Kristen Lewis would like to add anything.
The only thing I'd like to add is that when we have well-intentioned educators and we have students that come into our class, as a science teacher, I experienced this. And when you have students come into your class that are functioning below grade level, your initial intention is to teach to that student's current state. If you switch your paradigm and teach to the grade level standard and give just-in-time supports to create access to that grade level standard, you create a situation where students can access grade level proficiency. Otherwise, you continue to perpetuate the spreading of the achievement gap.
If I may add to that thinking, it's about mindsets, because we need to get people on board in terms of this conceptual understanding, and then we're also teaching them the procedural part of it. But if people have the right mindset, that's the first part of this. So if a child does transfer from school A to school B, even if we're not sure exactly how to do it, if we have the right mindset, then we will work collaboratively to figure out a way in that moment as we continue to build the system. So it's about making sure our instructional leaders have the right mindsets, and are committed to finding a way to make it work for the students.
Wonderful, thank you. And it sounds like Ms. Lewis has done what I've often wondered, how hard it would be to unpack all of this to these standards. And it's not easy, but when you roll up your sleeves and do the hard work, there it is.
Great team.
Yes. Other questions, thoughts from the board?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, I have no questions. I just want to say that this is wonderful information and really exciting, and I'm pleased with the path that the district has chosen, and really looking forward to the outcomes that we'll see from our students. Thank you.
And I'm pretty sure, Deputy Superintendent Romero, you can tell me, we have had a presentation on this before. It was a while ago, I think, with then Deputy Superintendent Sink and thinking about this, and it's clearly developed a long way.
Yes.
And I would just say it's clear it is hard work. It's clear it is a path. I really appreciate the comments about developing the right mindset. This is a great discussion, and the board hopefully can help with that, and the ambassadors in the community, talk to parents, do whatever we can do to support this transition. Sounds like it's, cutting edge, and some other districts are doing some good work that, maybe we can compare notes with and learn with in a sort of community of practice type of thing. But I also just want to say, please bring this back whenever. Let's talk about this more and more and more. This is honestly, it's so exciting. It's like emotional because it's so the right thing. And in the pandemic, we all heard the need for this, and maybe that helped to accelerate this work, because it's clear it has come a long way, but just amazing stuff. And let's keep going and make sure we don't lose the momentum and the importance of this, and the gravity of what this could do for our students and for equity in our district. And even, it sounds like, for our staff and teachers and everybody in the classroom, and we need these things that are inspiring again, that help the folks who are such big-hearted people. They went into education in the first place to remember why it's so good to do this work, because it's been a hard couple years.
Madam President,
yes, go
along
ahead,
those lines, thank you. Along those lines, I also just wanted to say that I appreciate specifically the approach to include teachers from the classroom in our district on, kind of this leadership team, because like David said, having that collaborative approach is really important, and the teachers need to share their opinions, their perspectives from being, on the front lines, so to speak, and to have their voices heard and their opinions shared, and to get that buy-in is really critical to the success of a program like that. So thank you for including them, and thank you to the teachers. I know their plates are already full, but for stepping up and helping when, like you said, they're just here because of all of those right reasons. And I appreciate it tremendously, because I know how thin they're stretched and how much is already on their plates. So we couldn't do it without them. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks again, Mr. Holden, Ms. Wolford, for being here. And thank you to all of the district team. This is really, truly inspiring. Great stuff. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Tonight is fabulous. I'm having so much fun, I must say. We are moving on to, I lost my agenda. Maybe somebody can help me with what's next. I think it's our action item.
Action, correct.
Okay, there we go. And we start with our consent agenda. And I'm now going to go ahead and pull up, we needed a couple of corrections rather to, there we go, to the minutes. And just board members, if I can ask, is there anything you want to consider separately on the consent agenda? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and say that on page 1, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the following changes to the minutes. On page 1, we add a C to Sasha Gwynn Anderson's name. On page 3, at the top of the page, we change the number 199 to 119. 119, not 199. So my motion is to approve with those small changes to the minutes.
Second.
I will second that.
Oh, sorry, Secretary Bozay. I think your laggy internet, had board member
Always
beach to it. Yeah. The good news is it's been nice and reliable tonight, which I can't say the same for mine. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote on the consent agenda. Secretary Bozay?
Yes.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
And the president also votes yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to action item B, we are on administrators' stipends. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Noble, members of the board. What I would like to just mention tonight is that we agreed to a good faith agreement with the Principals Association at the conclusion of the 2021 school year. That good faith agreement was about retention stipends for our principals, our administration team. So those individuals will be funded out of ESSER, and they will be receiving $1,000 retention stipend. So just wanted to make that of note tonight that we will be moving forward at the conclusion of this board meeting to fund the retention stipend for our administrators through our ESSER funding. Our second, or item C, is a resolution 2021-2022-3, Santa Fe Public Schools Participation in Local Government Road Fund program administered by New Mexico Department of Transportation and Local Government Road Fund Cooperative Agreement. That was a mouthful. Deputy Superintendent Wagner and Executive Director of Operations Gabe Romero will talk a little bit about this resolution.
Okay, and just to be clear, you don't need action from the board on item B.
We do not.
Okay, thank you. So we're now on item C.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Romero.
Board President Noble, board members. We have before you an agreement and a resolution for your consideration this evening because we have an approved project by the Department of Transportation that is eligible for a local government road grant fund. This road grant fund project will improve access to Capitol High School, and your approval will allow the Santa Fe Public Schools to enter into an agreement with the New Mexico Department of Transportation in which they will pay 75% of this particular project. The total cost of the project, as you can see before you, is $73,853. The New Mexico Transportation Department will pay a share of 75%, which is equal to $55,390, and our part of the Santa Fe Public Schools part will be $18,463. The staff recommends approval of the agreement and the resolution.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Romero. Any questions from the board?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson.
I will second that.
Thank you, Secretary Bozay. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, changing it up this time. Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Secretary Bozay,
Yes.
and I will also vote yes. So we have approved Resolution 2021-22-3. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving swiftly along to board discussion and possible action. We have on the agenda our fiscal year 2021-2022 board committee appointments until they're filled. So at this stage, audit committee, we will look at first. Board Member Anderson, are you ready at this point to appoint somebody?
Board President Noble, Superintendent, my apologies. I am not at this point ready. I have just jumped in to wrap my head around this. So at the next meeting, I believe I will be ready to appoint someone. So my apologies that I'm not quite ready this evening.
No worries. And if you need any help, obviously you can out to the superintendent. I'm also happy to help if you find somebody who has any questions about the audit committee. I've served on that a long time, and it's love the audit committee. It's not for everyone, but
I do have someone in mind. I just have to make sure she has the bandwidth. So
great. All right. And then moving on to the community review committee, which I believe Board Member Anderson and Secretary Bozay, you may both, that's because Board Member Anderson vacated Secretary Bozay's appointed position on this, but do either of you have somebody to put on that board tonight?
Madam President, I have put out a couple feelers, but I do not have anyone to nominate at this time, hopefully by next meeting.
And Board President Noble, I'm in the same boat. Secretary Bozay has declined my offer to appoint her to the.
We could just appoint each other back and forth forever and ever.
So I will also have someone at the next.
Alas, we will find other committed citizens, community members that are willing to participate and volunteer their time.
There are.
I am sure of it.
Yes.
Great. And the good news is both of those committees, audit and the CRC, are, I think, working fairly well. And so finding goodwill members, and everybody's so busy right now. I really get it. It's hard. But we appreciate everyone who is serving and will serve when nominated. And okay, so anything else to bring up for board discussion and possible action? I already sort of blew my lead in this one resolution about a staffing crisis, that there seems to be a headline every day that can add a different whereas. So it seems time. And Superintendent, I hope I can have your and anybody's help from the team as to what of those, therefore be it resolved, to Grace Mayer's question, how we address these crises, and would love any input from any board members as well. And hopefully that we can start ringing this bell, pass a resolution and do some things, because we are in a staffing crisis and have been. It's just accelerating.
Board President Noble, do you think that's something we would have a study session on before you introduce the resolution, or would we just go straight into introducing the resolution? I'm new here, so my apologies.
So, we decide how we do these resolutions. I would be inclined to move forward on the resolution and then maybe invite some folks in a study session as we think about action or something like that. Certainly open to however we want to approach this. The pattern of doing a study session and then bringing forward a resolution, which we had, I'm sure you've seen with the career and technical education thing, is not necessarily a pattern. We've actually never done that before in my time on the board, but it made sense for that one in part because there was so much already in motion from the staff and the teams in career and technical education that seemed like a good organizing time and principle, but I'd be inclined to bring this one forward first and then think about whether we need and want a study session on it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think I just might put this out there, since we are in a meeting where we can have a conversation among more than one of us, but I would love to see a study session on affordable housing as we move forward, since that's identified as such a critical need. And I know you have a lot of contacts in that area, so it would be fantastic if we could pull something together to inform future action.
Great, I love it. And maybe even I keep thinking about, it's a decent amount of work for staff, but we haven't had a joint meeting with the city in a long time, and that might be a really good topic to think about, and bringing in the Civic Housing Authority and some other folks who play in that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on board discussion?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, I would also, this is something that has been kind of floating around in my brain for the last month or so, probably highlighted by the return to school and really being highly aware of the social emotional impacts of COVID and our kids being at home for the last 18 months. Really, you know, and this has always kind of been one of my things, but really thinking about health and that health, both being mental health. I know that there are some behavior issues that are happening just as a consequence of the pandemic, really, I think. Recognizing the trauma that all has been for everyone, some more than others, and but also with the lens that we're in the 21st century now. And so I think a lot of, maybe because I haven't gone through all of the resolutions about health and whatnot that the district has, but kind of wanting to update or upgrade the way that we view health in the district, with a heavier emphasis on mental health, but also things like digital citizenship, and also things like, you know, there was a discussion recently on social media about consent, and so thinking about all of those aspects. And I know that they are taught in pockets, but I think that we could do better and we could do more. And it would be great if all students at all schools had access to kind of a more broad curriculum to prepare them for the world that is very different than it was, you know, 25 years ago when we graduated, or less, you know, give or take. So I just, you know, that's something that's kind of been on my brain lately, and I would love to work with whomever on that, whether that's updating existing resolutions or action plans or whatnot, or coming up with new things that are a little more relevant to the time that we're in.
So a suggestion, just to, you know, borrow from Board Member Anderson's previous suggestion, but that sounds to me like a really good study session. And
yeah,
and maybe something, I mean, you just did a pretty good windshield overview of sort of more expansive thinking about health, with some of those elements brought in. And I wonder maybe if, I mean, I'm certainly into it, and if Board Member Anderson is into it, then we follow our existing, there's a good nodding, we follow our protocols of asking, you know, that 3 board members agree before we go off on some big old path. But yeah, and I'd be happy to, or you could have another board member work with you and the superintendent and whomever he designates on sort of figuring out what a study session like that might look like, what community partners we might bring in to be thought partners, and potentially for whatever updates we need to do for the district. I'd imagine that there are community resources and partners that we would want to activate in a lot of different arenas as well. And I don't know if
Right,
we have...
and similar to with the CTE, there is some of this happening already. Like I said, some of it district-wide and some of it in smaller pockets. So just to kind of have an overview of what's being done, a discussion on where we could go, the ideal scenario, and kind of addressing all of those new needs that maybe haven't been on the radar before.
And Secretary Bose, I'm sure you're aware, but we did receive that grant, Project Aware, to really help boost our mental health and well-being. So that's something that, we're working on. And I see Sue O'Brien on this meeting as well. So I think we could bring a great team to really help work with you on this and the board. And like you said, President Noble, activate some of our community partners.
Wonderful.
Sue?
If I may, Board President Noble and Superintendent Chavez,
Yes,
I would love the opportunity in a study session to share with the board what our current work is, what we've been doing around mental health, and like Board Member Bose was talking about, health in general. So we would love that opportunity to share that with you, and then obviously work with Board Member Bose on other ideas, how we can implement this, particularly in a time when people are fatigued. And so that, of course, is the bigger challenge right now, but I look forward to that. So I'll get working on that as Superintendent Chavez directs.
I'll just, Board President Noble, Superintendent Chavez, just a comment that I am a longtime fan of the work of Sue O'Brien and her team. So I very much look forward to hearing what they're working on right now and how we can support that.
Hallelujah. So does that sound good, Secretary Bose? You happy to sort of take the lead for the board on putting together the study session with the superintendent and the team?
Yeah, very much so.
Yay. We're going to change the world in like short order.
Ready or not.
Ready or not, here we come. Okay, that's good stuff. Anything else on board discussion? Okay, moving on to, I think, I've lost my agenda again, advanced planning. And
you are correct.
We're reaching that time of the year where mercifully or frustratingly, or whatever emotion you choose, we have not that many meetings before the end of the year. We have another one in October, 2 in November, I believe, and then 1 in December, as well as the NMSBA annual convention, which will be in person in early December. And the CRC committee was canceled for next week. Is that correct? Yes, it is.
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll update advanced planning. The audit committee is still on track for the 14th.
Correct.
And then we'll come together again as a board on the 21st, and the superintendent, as ever, and Alma will let us know if we need an executive session.
Absolutely.
Anything else on advanced planning? Okay, well, this has been one of my favorite board meetings in a long time for a number of reasons. And I wish our other board members had been here for that inspirational stuff, but we will fill them in a variety of ways. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, team, board members. It's been really great. We are adjourned.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.